It's October 8th, 1871, and Chicago is stretching out under a dry, dusk sky with nothing but a soft southwest breeze drifting through wooden streets that have been baking in drought for months on end. What nobody walking those sidewalks realizes is that their entire city has quietly become a tinderbox, just waiting for a single spark to set the whole thing ablaze. With the help of AI, I rebuilt this exact moment for you, so stick around, you won't believe what happens next. By late summer 1871, Chicago was perfectly primed for disaster. Rainfall had been painfully scarce across the entire region, with only about 1 inch falling from early July through the first week of October. The long drought had dried out wooden buildings everywhere you looked, turning ordinary homes into kindling. The city's structures were mostly balloon frame houses and shops topped with tarred or wooden shingle roofs. Even the sidewalks and many of the streets themselves were made from wooden planks rather than stone or brick. Then, on October 8th, strong southwest winds began gusting hard across this parched landscape. In the O'Leary family's cramped back alley lot at 137 DeKoven Street, a small barn sitting next to their modest cottage suddenly caught fire. City officials never officially proved the exact cause of the ignition, and legend would long blame Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's cow for kicking over a lantern. In truth, all it really took was an overturned lamp and one howling wind to turn a single spark into a roaring blaze that would consume everything in its path. By 8:40 that evening, the flames had already leapt from the small barn to neighboring wooden buildings, and the fire was rapidly picking up speed. Before midnight, the blaze had spread past a fire break at a railroad stockyard and crossed directly over the Chicago River itself. Glowing embers were blowing high up into the dark sky, turning the entire night suddenly orange and black. Along the South Branch lumberyards and down the plank roads that crisscrossed the city, massive stockpiles of dry wood fueled the inferno like gasoline poured onto a campfire. Within just a few hours, the fire had swept toward the beating heart of downtown Chicago. Residents who had gone to bed thinking about ordinary Monday morning plans were now being woken up by neighbors pounding on doors and shouting that
the city is burning!
The scale of what was about to happen was something no American city had ever experienced before, and nobody was truly prepared for it. From its start, late on the evening of October 8th through the morning of October 10th, the Great Fire completely consumed the center of Chicago. Flames tore through block after block with terrifying speed, leaving almost nothing standing in their wake. Churches, banks, luxury hotels, theaters, and even the prison barracks downtown were engulfed in ash and flame within minutes of being reached. By dawn on Monday, October 9th, Mayor Roswell Mason had already telegraphed desperately to nearby towns asking for help. The grand courthouse cupola collapsed at 2:30 in the morning, sending its enormous bell crashing down to the street below in a shower of sparks. Panic spread through the city as thousands of people fled their homes into the smoke-filled night with whatever they could carry. Chicago's exhausted fire department was facing an impossible situation. The entire city had only 185 firefighters available, supported by just 17 steam engines to cover the whole urban area. They fought bravely throughout the night, but they were completely overwhelmed almost from the very start. A series of miscommunications in the early hours of the fire sent crews to the wrong location, giving the flames a dangerous head start that nobody could ever make up. As the fire jumped across both branches of the Chicago River by Monday afternoon, it tore through downtown and then leapt across the north side of the city. A spectacular fire whirl, essentially a spinning tornado made of pure flame, lofted burning debris high into the air and scattered it even farther across the landscape. These fire tornadoes made it almost impossible for firefighters to predict where the next block would ignite. By late Monday evening, the worst of the fire was finally beginning to burn itself out. A 3-day inferno had absolutely wrecked Chicago. Official estimates counted about 300 lives lost, 17,000 buildings completely destroyed, and more than 100,000 people left homeless overnight. A total of about 2,100 acres, which is roughly 3.3 square miles, lay in charred ruins from edge to edge. That destruction represented roughly 1/3 of the entire city. The business district was simply gone, wiped off the map. Whole neighborhoods were leveled right down to bare earth, with nothing standing higher than a few feet of rubble and ash. Newspapers across America called the disaster a calamity without parallel in the nation's history. But even in the middle of the smoking ruins, Chicago's own papers urged the stricken city to cheer up, declaring solemnly that Chicago shall rise again. In the immediate days, after the fire burned out, the scene across Chicago was pure chaos. Smoke still drifted from smoldering timbers all across the city while looters moved through the ruins stealing whatever they could find. The city government responded quickly by declaring martial law on October 11th, boarding up broken windows and ordering armed patrols through the streets to maintain order. Chicagoans who had lost their homes camped in tents set up in the ruins of public parks. Many families sent their children and women out of the city entirely for safety, keeping only the men behind to guard what little property remained. Offers of help began pouring in from across the entire nation, and even from overseas, marking one of the largest humanitarian responses in American history up to that point. Help arrives from everywhere. Railroad cars and loaded wagons started arriving in Chicago within days, carrying food, clothing, tents, and even prefabricated wooden homes that could be assembled quickly to shelter displaced families. The outpouring of generosity came from every corner of the country and beyond. Cities from New York to San Francisco sent money, supplies, and work crews to help with the recovery effort. One particularly meaningful gift came all the way from Britain, where donors contributed over 8,000 books specifically to help start the Chicago Public Library. That single donation became a powerful symbol of hope rising from the ashes, representing the idea that knowledge and culture could be rebuilt alongside the physical city itself. Chicago Tribune co-owner William Bross urged his readers and his city forward with a now famous declaration, writing simply, "Cheer up, Chicago shall rise again." Remarkably, the rebuilding of Chicago began almost immediately after the flames had died down. William Bross told readers of the Tribune that walking through the wreckage was a most peculiar sensation, but he implored everyone across the country to hurry to Chicago and help rebuild the city from scratch. Thousands of workers, carpenters, and laborers answered the call and began streaming into town within weeks. By the next spring of 1872, thousands of makeshift wooden shops and small businesses were already selling goods right in the middle of the ruins. Insurance payouts from companies that had not been bankrupted by the fire, combined with massive loans from Eastern banks, fueled a construction boom unlike anything Chicago had ever seen before. In just the first few years after the disaster, Chicago issued over 10,000 building permits to replace everything that had been lost to the flames. One Tribune editorial boldly prophesied that Chicago would be completely rebuilt within just 5 years and would swell to a population of 1 million people by the year 1900. That prediction sounded impossibly ambitious at the time, but Chicago's recovery would prove even faster and more dramatic than anyone dared imagine in those smoky days of late 1871. Yet the urgency to rebuild quickly often clashed with the basic caution that the fire itself had taught everyone. Ironically, many people simply rebuilt their homes and shops exactly the same way they had been before. Wooden houses and stores went right back up in the same spots where ashes still lay on the ground. As architect Jerry Larson later noted, most buildings were rebuilt almost exactly as they looked before the fire, which seemed to completely miss the point of what had just happened. Chicago's leaders had promised publicly after the disaster that there would be no more wood allowed in the city, and that every new structure would be built from stone or brick. City officials did pass new building codes designed to prevent another catastrophic fire, but those codes were resisted fiercely by property owners or watered down significantly before they could take effect. For a while, pure survival and getting businesses running again mattered far more to most Chicagoans than fireproofing for some future disaster that might never come. The wealthy downtown district did see more brick and stone construction than before, but residential neighborhoods on the outskirts went right back up in wood, just like before. This compromise between caution and speed would shape the city's architecture for decades to come. By 1873, just 2 years after the disaster, most of downtown Chicago's basic layout of streets and blocks had been fully restored. The population was recovering rapidly from the 1871 catastrophe, and new residents were actually moving into the city faster than ever before. Chicago's reputation as a place of opportunity and rebirth began spreading across America and Europe. The fire, as terrible as it had been, ironically gave Chicago something that no other major American city could claim. It had a completely blank canvas right in the middle of its downtown, and architects and builders took advantage of that canvas in ways that would change American cities forever. The modern skyscraper would eventually be born in Chicago's rebuilt downtown, partly because the fire had cleared the land for bold new experiments in construction. When flames consumed Chicago starting October 8, 1871, the world expected the city to collapse for good. But what happened next proved something remarkable about American cities. A disaster that would have permanently ruined many towns became, for Chicago, a strange kind of beginning. The fire did not end Chicago's story. It forced Chicago to write a new chapter, one that would eventually make it one of the great cities of the world. That wraps it up for today. If this one hit different, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And tell me down in the comments, what event or time period should I cover next? Thanks for watching.